Okay. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class. Actually, I like to check my microphone before starting this. Pretty sure it's good, but just in case. Okay, good. We are on. Baruch Hashem. Welcome to the Parsha class, Parsha Bo 5784. Sorry for the late start, but I hope the content will more than make up for the lack in timeliness. The Parsha Bo is the last Parsha that deals with the 10 plagues. The last three of the 10 plagues occur here. We've spoken about this in previous years. Today, if possible, I'd like to not avoid the plagues, avoid them like a plague, but really focus on some of the other things that happen in this week's Parsha, including the introduction of mitzvot for the Jewish people. The first mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh is in this week's Parsha, as well as a number of other mitzvot that deal with the night of the Pesach Seder, but also tefillin and some very fundamental ideas in regards to that. Some of the things I'd like to share with you today, from the words of our sages, if possible, if given the opportunity. Okay, so with no further ado, let's share the screen so we can get to the text. We can look at some of the verses in some detail with commentary. Let's begin towards the beginning, chapter 10. Yeah, chapter 10, verse 1, where Parshat Bo begins. And it says, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe." Hashem says to Moshe, "Bo, right, come, el Paro, come to Paro. Ki ani hibadeti et libo. I have strengthened his heart, vetlev avadav, and the heart of his servants. Laman shiti ototai ele bikibo, so that I can so I can have my signs and wonders in their midst among them." And we've spoken in many different contexts and different commentaries to try to understand the idea of hardening Paro's heart. But this is unusual, points out the Or HaChaim, in that this verse also says that Paro's servants' hearts were also hardened. Is there a reason for this? Does it have some sort of message that we can take home with us? And the answer is undoubtedly yes. So let's see how he explains this. Tam kovet lev hadav hu l'chol yatzuhu l'shaleach. So the reason why the hearts of Paro's servants were made hard was in order that they should not lo yatzuhu l'shaleach. That he should not, so that they should not give him Eitzah, they should not give him advice to send out the Jewish people. Imagine if Paro is very stubborn, he doesn't want to send out the Jewish people, but everybody else around him, 99.9999% of all of his people are saying, go, do it. So he'll have to bend eventually. But if all of them are of the same mindset, so they won't pressure each other to send out the Jewish people. We don't want to send out the Jewish people because, again, as the verse continues, Hashem wants to show his signs among them. And this is the reason why the Makot the plagues affected all of the Egyptians, and not just Paro alone. See, we always think of Paro as the bad guy, and he is. He's not the only bad guy. We don't want the plagues to only be on him. There wouldn't be Persume Nisa. There wouldn't be the publicity There wouldn't be the everybody knowing about these makot the way Hashem wants that to happen. Hashem wants for the whole world, for everybody to know that Hashem is real. Miracles happen. These signs and wonders need to be clear for everybody. Needs to be for everybody to see, and for that to happen, the Egyptians themselves need to see it. Obviously. Now we've got to now we've said that, all of that makes sense, but we're going to have a little bit of a problem, says the Orach Chaim. V'agam shelo hiski Hashem prat zeh b'shlichut rishona v'lo amar ele hakshet et lev paro. If that's all true, then we got a bit of a problem, and that is that if we're going to strengthen the hearts of all of the Egyptians, then why did Hashem tell Moshe that he's going to strengthen the heart of Paro? Only, doesn't say only, but it implies that Paro's heart and nobody else's. Was your heart hardened? Was mine? Is everybody's heart hardened? Is it just willy-nilly? No, it has to have some sort of explanation. So back then he said he's going to harden Paro's heart. This is back in chapter 7, verse 3, if you want to look it up. Amar ha'ikar v'chlalo heim avadav. So maybe he didn't have to mention all of the servants, because by mentioning the main Egyptian, Paro, he represents, as a figurehead he represents the country. That's the least that a figurehead should do. Right? Give me a quick moment. Just realized something. We'll fix that in just a moment. Okay. That's the least that a figurehead should do, is that he represents the people. So by mentioning just Paro, he didn't have to mention, Hashem did not have to also mention did I not send it? I'm sorry, give me a moment. Technology is a blessing and a curse sometimes. There we go. Copy, sure. The copy. Yeah. Okay. Again, I apologize for the delay. There we go. So this is and here's the common problem that occurs when you give an answer, is that that answer can sometimes lead to more questions, right? So so here we have the we have a pretty good explanation as to why. Here we go. Where's that? Yeah. Okay. As to why Paro was not mentioned, why Paro was mentioned alone before, and his people were not mentioned. So if that's the case, so then why are you mentioning his people now? So, we have a good answer. Paro's the figurehead. You don't have to mention other Egyptians, so don't mention him now either. Why here do we have to say that they're mentioned as well? Amar ha'ikr b'chol heim avadav ulai shenitkaven Hashem b'dvarav kan. But here Hashem meant perhaps to say lefarish lo dvarim harishonim, to explain the previous words, because Moshe is talking to Paro. Moshe is talking to Hashem right now, and when Hashem says Paro and his servants, Moshe is going to say, "Wait a minute, why his servants? Why not before? Why are we strengthening their hearts now?" Shelo leiv Paro levad elagam leiv avadav. So it's not just it's not just Paro's heart, but also his servants' hearts as well. So Hashem is basically explaining his previous statement. V'tam shelo bir mikodim bir ata. So now, okay, now we understand that. But why are we explaining that now and not previous times? Why couldn't we have this conversation earlier? What's happening now that we need to know about the Paro's servants now? Litzach Amar Moshe leParsha hakodemet be'atav avadecha gila dato ki hu sover she'ein hazkarat avadav nichleled b'hizkarat paro. But now he's about to have now the Moshe just mentioned in the previous verse, the last few verses of Va'era, he said, "You and your servants aren't afraid of Hashem." He's basically pointing out that he didn't think that he realized, in Moshe's own words, you and your servants means that Paro is a separate entity from his servants. So that means perhaps Moshe is confused about who he's talking about when he says that your heart is hardened. So Hashem needs to clarify that to him. So that's why now, so it could be that if Hashem would have only said, I'm hardening Hashem Paro's heart, Hashem would have said to Moshe that he's hardening Paro's heart, Moshe might have thought that it means only his heart. So Yachshov ki chizuk lev avadav lo me'Hashem yata davar. You might have thought that the hardening of the servants' hearts was a natural thing, had nothing to do with Hashem. Ze'amar ani hikbariti et libo vet lev avadav. That's why Hashem had to make it very clear that natural things like that happen also through Hashem. Hashem hardened the heart of Paro and his servants. Good. All right, so that's how we'll begin. And again, the idea is these great Mefarshim, they ask a question, good question, they come up with an answer, but that answer needs to be bounced against other answers and other potential situations, and in their wisdom, they're able to come up with some brilliant explanations that make sense and are consistent with the words of our sages. And in other words, consistent with truth, not just their truth. Yeah. So let's skip to the initiation of the first mitzvah of the Jewish people. There are other mitzvot. There are 3 mitzvot, all the Sefer Bereshit. This is the first mitzvah that's given to the Jewish people as a nation, not to one person, not to a group, to the entire Jewish people. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. This month will be the beginning of the months for you. Rishon hu lachem lechadshe hashana, beginning of the year of months for you. A lot of verbiage there, a lot of different ways of saying this is the new moon, this is the new month. This could have been said a lot shorter phrase. What are we supposed to learn from this? So it says this for HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim mikan ve'elech. From now on, you HaChodashim shalachem. The months are yours. You are free to own them. They are for you to do what you need to do with them. Asot bahem kiritzonechem. To do with them whatever it is you wish. As opposed to hashibud, when you were slaves, lo hayu yimechem shalachem, your days were not yours. You couldn't just do whatever you wanted. You couldn't say, today I don't feel like coming into work. Today I'm not in the mood. When you're a slave in Egypt, you show up for work. Not feeling so well, I need a substitute. Let's see how this whip substitutes for your desire to come to work. All right? You'll come and you'll do what you're supposed to do, because that's what slavery means. This new month, our celebration of the month, is our celebration of our freedom to do as we choose. When the days were not yours to do whatever you wanted to do with them, that was different. Now the fichach rishon hu lachem lechadsher hashana kivo hitchil mitziot erechem habechiri. Your ability to choose and have free will starts with this month. The idea being that time is the only thing in this world that you have, and you can do with it whatever you choose. You can use your time for good things, for bad things, God forbid. Or you can idle your time away. And we know from the Mishnayot that we learn, and we're actually in the Ketubot, the fifth Mishnah in the fifth Parak. It says very clearly what happens when somebody who has too much free time on their hands. This libertine attitude usually leads to zima, to immorality. A good thing for us to talk about now in the months of Shovavim, and right smack in the middle of Shovavim in a way. So that is why a lot of bad things, why people get into a lot of bad things, because they have all this free time to do this ennui, as the French used to call it, this boredom that leads to all kinds of bad behaviors amongst young people. It doesn't have to be young people anymore. People can be young for people can be in their 60s and still playing video games. You know what I'm saying? So not that there's anything wrong with that as a way to relax a little bit. As long as it doesn't become a serious habit, we can be all right. But again, time is a very important, essential freedom that we have, and we can do with it as we wish. That freedom came to us with the beginning of Rosh Chodesh. And again, all mitzvah observance is really, in the end, our choice. You can choose to use your time to do a mitzvah or not. And the reward you receive is because you chose on your own, not because anybody forced you, but because you chose to do a mitzvah. You get a reward for that. Give me one moment. Just want to grab something. There we go. And we're back. All right. Baruch Hashem. Okay. Yeah. That's not exactly. This is okay. Okay. So the Pasha continues with the eventual exodus from Egypt. The Jews finally leave Egypt at the end of the Parsha, and after the 10th plague, the plague of the death of the firstborn Egyptians, and okay, should learn how to count someday. There we go. And the verse tells us Moshe b'nei Yisrael asher yashu b'Mitzrayim shloshim shana v'arba me'ot shana, that the Jewish people were in Israel for 430 years. 430 years. Now this goes up against our understanding of the history of how long they lived there. This verse says explicitly it was 430 years. The question is 430 years from when? When do you start this count? We know when we end the count. We end the count at the end of slavery, when the Jewish people leave on Pesach night. I'm okay with that. But when do you start the actual the actual time we spent in Egypt? Is it when we got to Egypt? Is it when we became slaves in Egypt? Is it when Yosef came to Egypt 17 years earlier? Where do you draw the line? What's the spark that makes it that beginning of our slavery? So let's look at the Ramban, who's going to quote some other opinions first, then he's going to give his own opinion. Shenola Yitzchak ad achshav haya arba meot shana, from the birth of Yitzchak until now is 400 years. שמשעה שהיה זרע לאברהם מתקיים בו כגר יזרעך בארץ לא להם. Abraham was promised in the Brit Bein HaBetarim, in the covenant between the parts. He was promised that his children would be slaves in a land not their own. Right? So he's promised that at the birth of Yitzchak, presumably. And so that 400, so maybe that slavery starts from the promise of the slavery. Shloshim shana haya shenegizra gzerat ben habetarim ad shenolad Yitzchak, and there were 30 years between that birth, between the birth of Yitzchak and this covenant of the parts. Shatmana arba meot mishenolad Yitzchak timtze v'viatam Mitzrayim ad yitziatan 210 shanim. And you could also do the math and figure out that 400 years from the time of Yitzchak's birth, you get to this time when he left Egypt, which was actually 210 years of actually being there. Zeh lashon Rashi. This is a quote from Rashi. Who das Rabbeinu, and this is also, Rashi didn't again come up with almost anything brand spanking new. Rashi learned this from the Midrash in the Mechilta. Ele she'ein betukan perusho kol tzarko. But the problem is, this doesn't really explain things very well. There's a few problems, he says, with this explanation. Sharei Katuv, it says in the verse, V'Avram ben chamesh shanim v'shivim shana b'tziato mecharan. It says in the verse that Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. And when was the covenant between the parts? Mamad ben Abitarim, ayu achar kach yamim rabim. And that this covenant between the parts was a long time after that. There are a lot of things that happened between him leaving Haran and the covenant between the parts. So Parshat Lech Lecha, right? Almost all happened between that time. So he's already 75, and Yitzchak was born when Abraham's 100. So that's 25 years. So and other things happened in between. So we don't have 30 like Rashi and the Mechilta are saying. So what's going on? Aval nitzrich l'taretz la'inyan kamo sheshashnu b'seder olam. So we need to look at an ancient book called Seder Olam, which gives kind of a history of events. And it says, Avram Avinu haya mish'a shenidvar imo ben bitarim ben shivim shana. He was 70 years old when that covenant between the parts happened to him. In other words, before he left Haran, 5 years before he left Haran. Shenamar, as it says in Shemot, he miket shloshim shana arba me'od shana yetzukol tzavakot Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim hazar Haran ve'asa sham chamesh shanim. It says in chapter 12, verse 41, which is, by the way, the next verse. So it says that after 430 years, that's when all the hosts of the Eternal went out from the land of Egypt. So that's a quote from this Seder Olam. Shneimar, it says in Bereshit Yud Bet Dalet Avram ben Chamesh Shanim v'Shivim Shana b'Tzeito Mecharan. So the fact that he was 75 years old when he left Haran, yet inyan hakatuv lomar ki b'Tzeito Mecharan eretz moladato lo chazar garu o b'Beit Aviv haya ben Shivim Chamesh Shana. So then when he went back, then he went and after. He returned to Haran and stayed there for 5 years. He was 75 years old when he left Haran, which is to tell you that. I'm sorry. 1 second. A question to answer real quick. And that's that. Okay. Baruch Hashem. Okay. So again, when he left his father's house, he was 75 years old. Vedati b'derech pshat. The Ramban is going to give his opinion based on pshat. We're going to have that word repeated quite often for the rest of our class today, because pshat is the simple, plain explanation of a verse. And as we're going to see, especially in our next section, the last section for the day, pshat can mean different things for different people. Okay, so over here we got derech pshat ki Hashem amar l'Avraham, when Hashem said to Avraham Yedoy Tida ki gitem titi l'cha haaretz azot ger yezarecha, that when he promised him that his descendants would be there'd be strangers in another land, yamim rabim, many years, arba meot shana, that it would be the verse says that they were going to be slaves there they're going to be in this land that's not their own for 400 years. Lo chashash lehodia hashloshim. He didn't feel it was important. Shem didn't feel it was important to mention the other 30 years. Like about 400, kind of like a little bit almost like exaggeration, or rounding. Yeah, he's rounding 430 to 400. Kamar lo od v'dor revi yeshuvu heina, and he said that the fourth generation will leave from there. That's chapter 15, verse 16 of Bereshit. L'hodia shelo yeshuvu miyad b'sof arba me'ot ad hador haravi sheyashalem avon ve'amori. So avon ve'amori. Again, saying that it would be 400 years of the fourth generation when the sin of the Amorim would be at its height. Yirmos shoshim shana halalu. This, by the way, hints to the 30 years. He amdam and bidbar abayim shana lo lifnei avon Amori shelo nishalim. So because they were in the desert for 40 years, it was not because of the sin of it was not because the sins of the Amorim was not at its height yet. In other words, the 430 years were completed when the Jewish people were told to leave Mitzrayim. The desert was a completely separate issue. The 40 years in the desert was because of the Jewish people's sin, the believing the spies, etc. So the point of this verse to tell us the numbers here, 430 years, because why did they live that long? Sheyashvu sham limalot lahem kain. Ba'aretz lo lahem u'diyu hakatuv ki atem b'tzeitem nishlama hagalut nigzerat alehem u'tziam me'avodat lecherut. They had a gezerah put upon them. Hashem made a decree that they would have to be slaves. They had to be in servitude for a certain amount of time. For that amount of time, for 400 years. Lo shi'otziam mi'mitzrayim ad od gerim be'eretz lo lahem. And he needed to take them out of Egypt only after they really felt like strangers in a land that wasn't their own. Bavur shekvar hiskir inyan zeh liyodia bo lo hutzrach bo laharich. And once that happened, then there was no reason to extend it any longer. Ki lo ba hakatuv hazeh rak liyodia lahashloshim shana nosfu alehem. This verse here that we're reading here, it's only here to tell us that it was added to the 40 years, the 400 years that Abraham was promised, because only then were the Jewish people ready to really feel that way. L'kach amar derech ktsara shlimo b'mitzrayim arba meot shana, and then the short way of saying it is that they were slaves for 400 years. And actually, people still do that today. You know, you hear people speaking about the slavery in Egypt. You say, "Oh, the Jews were slaves for 400 years." Nobody says 430, right? Abraham Avinu yodea lahem בעוד 30 שנה, לחזר אמר, ויהי מקץ 30 שנה, ו400 שנה, לגלותם יצאו מארץ מצרים, לחירות עולם. So only then, in the next verse, he's going to say, after 430 years, that's when they were going to go out of Egypt. That's when they went out of Egypt for forever. Out of slavery forever. Domelo, and there's other verses he says that are like that. Hayamim asher halachnu mikadesh barnea ad asher avarnu et nachal zered lamed chet shana. It says that there were for 38 years that they went from between these Kadesh Barnea and Nachal Zered. Again, this is the beginning of a Sefer Devarim that lists the different travelings of the Jewish people. If you really want to do the math, ki lo halchu mikadesh barnea ad nachal zered lamed chet shana, that they didn't go from one place to another for 30 years. Aval yashvu mikadesh shanim rabot, they lived in Kadesh for many years. Then they went after the Yam Suf, after the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, they went towards back in that direction as part of the punishment. Ushnat lamed chet avru nachal zered v'hine shur hakatuv v'hayamim asher halachlu b'kadesh barnea ad asher avarnu et nachal zered ad shloshim b'shmonim shana. So if you really want to do the math, you'll figure out that it was after the 38th year that they went from Kadesh Barnea to Nachal Zered. Right. And he says, come over. There's a verse in Daniel that's similar. Ashrei Hamachake Yegia Lamim Elef Shalosh Meot Shloshim Chamisha Shegia Lekatzam V'lo Lahem Atzmam. So happy is the person who reaches the days and not all of the days. In other words, you can round is what the Ramban is saying. The Torah sometimes rounds numbers. It doesn't have to say 430 when that's the actual number. Sometimes it says 400, and that implies the other 30. So that's the Ramban there. And again, this is just helping us to understand that the Torah is perfect, right? Let's start with that. And if there's any possible inconsistencies, here it says 400, there it says 430. Well, was it, God forbid, different authors? Did this author forget what number he was up to? No, these numbers mean something. And in this particular case, 430 is the exact amount of time that it took between the time that Abraham got the promise and the actual slavery ended. It's 430 years. It doesn't have to be exactly 430 years to the day, to the minute, to the second. Right? How that's not the point here. It's about 400 years. And really, the Jewish people needed those extra 30 years for the sins of the Amorites and for their own feelings of nationhood and being oppressed in a land that's not their own. All of that is significant. All right. We have a mitzvah in this week's parsha of tefillin. Tefillin is a great mitzvah that has a lot of, especially lately, has gotten a lot of publicity. There's a lot of people putting on tefillin who haven't put it on in a long time, and definitely nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do this mitzvah. However, perhaps it's not so clear what this verse is saying after all. Let's read the verse and pretend we know nothing about it. Okay? This should be a sign, al yadecha, on your arm, uzikaron bein einecha, and a memory between your eyes. Leman tiyeh Torah Hashem bificha, that Hashem's Torah should be in your mouth. Ki biyad chazaka hu etziacha Hashem miMitzrayim, because Hashem took you out with a strong hand out of Mitzrayim. So there should be a sign on your head, a sign on your arm, and a remembrance between your eyes, and Hashem's Torah should be in your mouth, all because Hashem took you out of Egypt with a strong hand. All of that's supposed to be remembered somehow through this verse. How is the question? And forget that you know anything about tefillin for a moment. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Al yadecha zikron bein einecha, shiktichtov parshiot halalu v'tiksherem berosh v'azra." You should write these verses that we have in the Torah about the Exodus from Egypt and how Hashem took us out with a strong arm, that we should write down, and we should attach those things to our arm and to our head. That way, we fulfill the verse almost literally. There should be a sign, right, on your arm. Should be a remembrance between your eyes. So yeah, literally put it on your arm, put it between your eyes, whatever that means. And there you go. That's Rashi. Comes along his grandson, the Rashbam. The Rashbam, that's not actually Pashut Pshat. Pashut Pshat means a simple explanation. V'od al yadecha lefi omek pshuto, and a sign on your arm according to the real, true, simple explanation. Yeh lecha zikaron tamid. Always remember it. Ki elu katuv al yadecha. But it means that it should be on your arm. Ke'ein shimenu v'kechotam al libecha. Like the verse in Shir HaShirim, it says that I should always be in your heart. It doesn't mean you put something in your heart. It means you always remember it. Something's on your arm, you're always remembering it. It's in front of you. In other words, keep it always before you. Doesn't mean literally. Rashbam just now, in his quote-unquote Pashut Pshat, he's basically saying tefillin is not a Pashut Pshat. And this fits very well with a Rashbam earlier on in the Torah. Well, I think we might have mentioned this Rashbam in other contexts, that he says, this is the beginning of Pashat Vayeshev, right? So he says there that his idea of Pashut Pshat, his simple explanation of the Torah, is based on something that the rabbi said. The rabbi said in the Gemara, "Ein mikra yotze midei pshuto." The actual whatever interpretation you want to give to a verse can't be too far away from its simple explanation. If the Torah says chase away the mother bird, and you come up with your own theology or symbolism for what this means, for me, a mother bird is a fancy car, and I shouldn't look at a fancy car when I'm driving a simple car. That's not what it means. The simple explanation is that you're chasing away the mother bird when you're eating its eggs, when you're about to take its egg. It's a mitzvah. There's a whole way to do it. Not for now. Right? So over there, he says that his main point is that there are all kinds of different explanations, not to say that they're not true, but there's other ways to explain the drush, there's all kinds of other ways to look at a verse and to plumb its depths. Nothing wrong with that. But the Rashbam's point is to do the Omek Pshat, the real simple explanation without having to go to mitzvot and other things like that. And this is a really a fundamental Rashbam, and maybe someday we'll revisit it. What I'd like to do now, however, is I'd like to share with you. How do I do this? I don't know. We'll find out in a moment. Yeah, okay. I'm still sharing my screen. We're going to look at the Mayan Beit HaShoeva by Shimon Schwab, and he quotes this Rashbam. And he quotes the Gemara in Yevamot Chav Dalet, that is that source, that Ein Mikra Yotze Midei Pshuto, except for a few examples that some verses cannot be interpreted in a simple explanation. But in general, that is the idea. So he quotes the Rashbam there, the entire Rashbam looks like, and he continues. So what we say, what comes out from his explanation, that even though they say they want a simple explanation, the pirush chazal, the simple explanation of the Rashbam is destroying the mitzvah of tefillin, taking it out of the water. Mikol bakum rotzon Hashem shenilmud gam kain hamikra al pi pshuto lo shehahalacha nivkat al pi drashat chazal. We're just going to relegate the halacha of tefillin into like the rabbinic drashot. It's not going to be the simple explanation. The simple explanation should end up being that you wear tefillin. Anam od lo yirve bizeh Simon Hashual Kevan She'ein Lemir Lomdim HaHalacha Bepirush Pashup Pshat Kedivrei Chazal. Right. So again, we don't want to contradict the words of the rabbis. That there is a mitzvah of tefillin, and it's from this verse. Then Namar, it says in Tehillim, Gal Einei ve'abitu niflot b'toratecha. It says in Tehillim, like, open up my eyes so I can see Hashem's Torah. Right? So, ki gam kishinamik b'toch pshat hapashut yitgalu lifneihem limudim nifloim. When you learn Torah, when you get past the pshat, when you get past that surface level, simple explanation, there's amazing things you can learn. V'hapshuto shel mikra kamo ha'or ha'mechase et habasar. The pashup pshat is like the skin on top of the meat. V'kamo ha'ohel ha'michse et ha'mishkan, like the covering of the Mishkan, shekach ele b'machshavto yitbarach l'chasot et hamitet shel Torah. It's Hashem's will that the depth and beauty and fruit and the meat of the Torah should be covered up, not with nothingness, not with an ugly something or other, but with also something beautiful, the pashup pshat, like the beautiful covering of the Mishkan. The essence of the Mishkan is inside, but it's covered by a beautiful tapestry. That beautiful tapestry is a simple explanation. And some people are okay with that. They're okay with seeing the Mishkan covered, and they're going to keep going. Some of us want to go a little bit deeper into the Mishkan and see something deeper, something more beautiful. The Amita Shel Torah, the truth of Torah. Shehi ha'halacha be'or shel pshuto shel mikra. The halacha, what you do is sometimes deeper than the surface area, the surface cover. And somebody who is able to see not just the simple explanation, but deeper, will see beautiful things in the Torah. And that's why we need to sometimes go and see how the rabbis of old have the Tanaim and Amoraim who explain the drashot of our Torah to teach us important things. V'tiyashu b'zeh divrei haRamban al pasuk bo. We can understand the Ramban's explanation in Parshat Bo. Moshe b'nei Yisrael asher yashvu Mitzrayim shoshim shana v'ba me'ot shana. So this is the Ramban we just learned, right? This whole 400 years, all that. Barashi tet shana. Rashi says it's 400 years. Sheminolad Yitzchak v'shoshim shana nigzir gzerat ben b'tarim ad shenolad Yitzchak. Umekoro mebraita the Seder Olam kamo via Ramban sham. Then the Ramban explains that the Seder Olam says it's a different order of al yedei ayin sham Ramban shekatav v'dati v'derech pshat. Right, the simple explanation, whatever that means. And then the Torah has a commentary on that there. B'dvar Tumua Eich Yachlok Ramban al Hatana. Ramban is arguing with the Tana Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta, B'Seder Olam. How can you do that? B'prat Rambam Soter et Atzmo. It would seem that he's arguing with himself. B'sof Perak Yud Bet B'Emuna B'Tachon. Ramban wrote a book called Emuna B'Tachon, Faith and Trust, where he says Holech Achar Cheshbon Habraita, the Seder Olam. He says to always go with the explanation that's given in Seder Olam. Aval Anicha Hananir Li Mavor Shechas V'Shalom Lo Katav Ramban Kineged Kabbalah Chazal. God forbid that the Ramban would argue with Chazal, with the rabbis. Shelefi Omek Pshuto Shel Mikra Ze Eino Nira. It's only according to the simple explanation that this doesn't seem so. Harei Nitztanu La'aso Gam Be'apshat Kemo Sharunu Chazal Ein Mikra Yotze Midei Pshuto. The simple explanation can't leave the simple explanation. And that's what it means that Hashem should remove the veil so I can see depth, more deep ideas in the Torah. I'm going to skip the Baal Ma'or for a moment. V'zehu tamu shel Rashbam l'farish l'ot al yadecha sheyel zikron tamid ki'elu katuv al yadecha. So this is the explanation of what the Rashbam means, that it should always be the sign on your arm should be that it should always be in your heart that Hashem took us out of Egypt. So why is it abita niflaot? What's this amazing idea? Shekol laila, all the night, ubi Shabbatot, and on Shabbat, and on Yomim Tovim, and on Yom Tov. She'ein mekayimim v'kshartem le'ot al yadecha. When we can't have the sign on our arms literally, when we can't listen to Rashi and Chazal literally and have a sign on our arms to remember the Exodus from Egypt, that's when the Rashbam kicks in. Upo al kain b'meirat kriyat shema niyeh chas v'sholem k'me'ayed edut sheker, as if we're lying when we're saying the Shema. Al zeh moralano omek b'pshat shegam b'laylo b'shabbat v'yom tov yesh kiyum inyan atfilin sheyul lanu l'zikron ke'ele katuv al yadeinu. So it's not a false testimony when we're saying Shema. And when we're talking about remembering Mitzrayim, even when we're not wearing tefillin at night or on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, or dare I say, and here I'm going out on a limb here, but how about for women? Right? Women who don't wear tefillin, right? They're not supposed to wear tefillin, and they come up to this verse. What are they supposed to get out of this? You know, they learn the Rashi that it's supposed to be tefillin on their arms. I don't wear tefillin. So what am I? How am I supposed to feel this exodus from Egypt? Was I not taken out of Egypt? Of course they were. So how are they supposed to feel it? That's the Rashban. That's the Rashban right there. Right? That having it as a sign on your arms is not just to be taken literally. It could mean that it's always in front of you. The fact that Hashem took us out of Egypt should always be in front of us, whether we're wearing tefillin, whether we're not wearing tefillin, whether we can wear tefillin or we can't. It doesn't matter. Tefillin isn't the only way, is not the only way to always have a sign in your arm and a remembrance in your head that Hashem took us out of Egypt. You should always remember. You should always feel it. On Shabbat and on Yom Tov, as Rav Schwab said, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you were taken out of Egypt, you should always feel it. Rav Schwab continues that there's a lot of places where you have this kind of argument between the Rashbam and the Rashi about how literally to take certain things. But again, the idea here is that the Rashbam's level of pshat is a rescue to us. It takes us out of this this doesn't affect me. This isn't relevant to me. It's always relevant, because if we take the Rashbam as the Pashut Pshat, a different level of Pashut Pshat, the real simple explanation, so that simple explanation is something that's relevant to all of us and can improve all of our relationships with Hashem and increase our knowledge and faith of Him in all of our situations, wherever we go. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a Shabbat Shalom. If you have any questions, please share them in the comment section.